My wife loves our daughter deeply, but our daughter has started being cruel to her after she became disabled. She refuses to be seen in public with her. Now I can't help but feel resentful. My daughter is 19, still very young but old enough to know what she did wrong. 5 years ago, my wife, her biological mother, began to exhibit very strange behavior. She would say weird things, make impulsive decisions, and act strange. She and my daughter would clash often. Now my daughter always was a daddy's girl, but she was still close with her mother. I honestly thought my wife was going through a midlife crisis and dealing with the pressures of working while raising a teen, and we had a come to Jesus talk. About 6 months after the start of that behavior, my wife ended up in a really bad accident. When they were performing emergency surgery, they found a ball-sized tumor pressing her brain, which was the cause of her initial behavior. My wife ended up having to relearn everything from walking to talking. She was still reeling from the effects of the accident and the brain tumor and was mentally and physically disabled for a while. Our daughter refused to be seen in public with my wife. She hated the mess of the wheelchair and her mother's condition. She would also just ignore her mother and speak to me all the time, sometimes even about her. She saw my wife as a burden and would complain to people, to the point where the school called me. At the time I was just struggling to get by and I couldn't alienate my daughter. My wife needed a lot of care and my daughter was in a difficult stage of her life that I couldn't abandon her in. When my daughter went off to college, I was sad but also somehow relieved. My wife still needs a wheelchair sometimes and she has difficulty with some things, but she has honestly improved so much. It really solidified our love for each other and our belief in our marriage. My daughter is coming for summer break after exams. I don't know why, but I feel uncomfortable with her staying for this long. I feel like the sense of closeness I had with her evaporated when she treated her own mother callously. I don't know what to do. My wife is very excited to have our daughter come, but I don't want to see her heartbroken. I've tried getting over it and talking with my therapist, but I just can't feel emotionally close with my daughter and I'm sure she'll notice. Am I wrong here? Edit. I don't know where any of your assumption about my wife are coming from. Her mother was never abusive in any way, including mentally or emotionally. When I said my wife did or said strange things, she had regressed in some ways to a child, which was exacerbated by the accident. For example, she would go on and on about a show she watched. She couldn't tell a story. She would spit out food if she didn't like it. My daughter would never have been put in an abusive situation. Edit 2. For those saying that my daughter became orphan at 14 as my whole focus was on my wife and asking if I protected her. Yes, I protected her. I was there for her every day. I was the one who cooked her dinner, who made her lunch, who helped her with homework, who drove her from every after-school event, who gave her driving lessons, who talked with her every day, who spent a day every week with just the two of us. It was hard, brutally hard. I had a wife in the hospital or in treatment or in physical therapy, and I wish I was there more because more often than not I was at work or with my daughter. She was the one who had to go through it alone. I thought it was the best I could do because my daughter was a child and my wife was an adult, but I don't know if I made the right choice. To see my daughter yell that she didn't want my wife to come because she didn't want the wheelchair, or her mom to embarrass her, or tell other people that she didn't know who that woman was, or ignore her mother when she reached out, or call her terrible names to her teacher. I buried it because I tried so hard to keep the family together, but I can't believe it. For those asking if I protected her from her mother, she didn't need to be protected from her mother, as if her mother was a monster. I did keep them apart as much as I could for much of it, and I would be the one to talk to our daughter or discipline her because my wife would get confused. My wife in the months before her accident would say things that were blunt or strange. For example, my mother had made a casserole and my wife, who is normally very polite, spat it out on her plate like a kid and said it tasted bad. This was right before she got into the accident. I remember it really clearly. Relevant comments. NTA, but make it clear to your daughter that she's only welcome there if she treats your wife with respect. She's lucky that her mother is still so excited to see her, after all that cruelty from her. Opie, I have made it clear. She rolled her eyes and agreed, but I am worried. My wife loves our daughter so much. Comment, is family therapy an option? Your daughter was 14 when her mother started acting very weirdly and then had a massive accident. I bet your daughter was terrified at the time. Give her a chance and try to see her for who she is now. Opie. I tried putting her in therapy and the two of us were in family therapy, but she said she was too busy and she didn't want to go anymore. I can't drag her to therapy. Like the therapist said, it's only helpful if she wants to be there. I can't push her to therapy to force her to change in the way I want. It has to be her decision. Comment. This is an unkindness that shouldn't be overlooked. OP. She just ignores her mother. My wife blames herself for estranging them and she doesn't have a good memory of what happened over those years. The way she looked at her mother with disgust. I know she was growing and this situation wasn't fair to her either, but that's her mother. The woman who birthed her and raised her and loved her. Comment. Your daughter's lack of compassion and empathy for her mother is disturbing. I'd ask her if she'd act this way if the situation was reversed and you were the one struggling to make it back. OP. I would be terrified of that answer. Because it wasn't like my daughter and wife weren't close before. They had a pretty tight mother-daughter relationship. Update. Mother's Day was terrible. I don't know why I'm updating this. Maybe it's for the few people can sympathize. A lot of the prior comments made untrue, horrible accusations about my wife. My wife was never abusive or even mean, not in any state. It makes it so much harder to understand why our daughter would be so cold to her own mother. My wife's mental state before the accident had regressed into childlike behavior, which is concerning but not the cause of my daughter's coldness. My wife would spit food out back into her plate, bluntly say it tasted bad, and then wipe her nose with her sleeve like a child. I made the error of thinking she was having a midlife crisis because she bought an expensive dress because it was soft. She would forget to do things, her responsibilities. Mother and daughter clashed because she would tell stories with no beginning and end, just rambling. She would ask the same questions over and over. She would promise to pick her up or bring something and forget. Things that would annoy a teenage girl. The tumor was concentrated in the back of the head. When she got into the car accident, it made everything worse. She needed to relearn everything. She is still disabled. We had high expectations for our daughter, but she set them higher for herself. She had a dream school, where she wanted to go since she was 12. It meant that I had to chauffeur to so many activities throughout high school and sacrifice a lot to make sure she got the opportunities she wanted. It meant leaving my disabled wife in a longer-term care facility to hopefully recover. It was COVID, so there were long stretches where we didn't visit her. She was there for too long. I never should have left her there. When she came home, my wife was still largely nonverbal and wheelchair-bound. She needed help with everything from eating to going to the bathroom. I earned a little as a caregiver on top of my regular job. My daughter was so cruel and cold to her mother at that time. She wasn't a young kid or even a young teen anymore. She was never expected and never did take care of her mother, so it wasn't caregiver burnout. She would hate it if her mother came outside with her and would later blame it on the wheelchair, saying it was bulky and attracted attention. She would ignore her mother and move away to distance herself physically. I ended up getting a call from the school because a classmate had overheard what she said about her mother and reported it as ableism. I don't know what she said. All I know is that she was very cruel to her mother. I had her in individual therapy and we did therapy as father and daughter. It was her choice to stop. My daughter ended up getting into her dream college. They had an accepted students' weekend and she demanded that her mother stay home even though parents were invited. By that time my wife had made leaps and bounds in progress and was disappointed to stay home. I went and tried to be a proud father. At least she let her mother go to graduation. My daughter came home a few days ago. Her exams were earlier. She informed us that she earned a research position with a professor for the summer. My wife was overjoyed, writing a card all on her own about how proud she was, and she wished she saw her daughter grow into an accomplished young woman. How proud she was to share this moment. My daughter looked sick with guilt. I know what that looks like. On Mother's Day, I made a comment that she couldn't ignore her mother today. She told me to stop saying that. I made another comment about how proud her mother was of her and how much she loved her. I was doing it on purpose. It ended up with her saying she regretted what she did. I always had my suspicions. I interrogated her until she tearfully admitted she hated what her mother had turned into, and she hit her mother once, and she was ashamed to be around her because of what people thought. We got into a shouting match, and she yelled at me that I was so focused on everyone else's behavior because I regretted my own. It's true in a lot of ways. Because of COVID, there were limited visiting hours. But I still didn't visit as much as I should have. I left my wife in a facility to focus on our daughter, but also so that it would be easier for me. There are no siblings, no grandparents to help. I didn't visit as much because I hated how much my wife would sob when I had to leave. I started feeling guiltier when I read a news article about a nurse being sentenced for assaulting a woman in a coma. I thought about my wife. She was nonverbal, had limited short-term memory, and wheelchair-bound. I wouldn't know what would happen. I tried to convince myself that it was fine, but all I did was find more and more news articles about abuse at care facilities. I would have nightmares. I pulled my wife out. Took months of work. I finally got her home. She was taken care of, but not like I would have. There were a few knots in her hair, bruising, sores. I won't lie, the care was brutal. Now I had to juggle taking care of my wife and making sure my daughter was supported and able to reach her dreams. And it was hard seeing my wife like that. She was accomplished and intelligent and now couldn't do a puzzle or eat on her own or go to the bathroom by herself. There was a huge learning curve and they assigned a nurse to come see my wife every few days. My wife is so sweet. I attend a caregiver support group and I feel guilty because my wife doesn't have the fits of temper or the rage or the depression that others did. I felt guilty for being tired. Some had it a lot harder than I did. She got better and over time it was like she was almost back to her old self. And she never lost love for either of us. It hurts that she blames herself for how our daughter treated her. Maybe I shouldn't have let my daughter focus on prestige and appearance so much. Maybe I should have realized the signs early on and exposed her to others. My daughter and I aren't speaking. My wife just wanted a happy family. I'm looking for therapy for us as a family. Relevant comments. I'm sorry. I hope it gets better. All you can hope for is continued progress for your wife and that your daughter will emotionally mature. She was in the throes of trying to fit in, so anything that called what she perceived as negative attention to her she couldn't handle. Also, as a teen, she likely didn't have the patience and empathy needed to understand why her mom was like that. It's not too late, but it's going to take patience and understanding from both of you and a willingness to not play the blame game. Opie. Later on it'll be hope. Right now I'm just dealing with resentment and guilt and just questioning where I went wrong. Because she was 16 to 18 when she acted like this. Young, yes, but old enough to be considered an adult if committing a crime. I know I'll have to buckle down and be the parent in this situation, but it's always in the forefront of my mind that she treated her own mother like this. Comment. Sometimes the choices our kids make and the people they become hurts us very, very deeply. There are times, and my wife and I had to deal with this, where just permanently separating from our offspring is the only thing we can do that will allow us to have a happy, peaceful life. To regain some level of happiness. I hope that, however your situation turns out, you and your wife do find that happiness again and live happily ever after. OP. I can't give up yet. I just have to have hope that she has changed for the better and that we can rebuild somehow. My wife would be devastated to be estranged from her baby.